You're listening to More Than Steps, the podcast where we geek out on how belly dance works, one coffee run at a time. I'm your hostess, Nadira Jamal.
This is part 5 of a multi-part series on how to use dimension to add depth to your dancing. This episode can stand alone, but if you want an overview, you can start with the episode titled Dimension. Out of all the dimensions, energy is the hardest to pin down. So I'm going to share my favorite definition, which comes from the Elements of Dance project at elementsofdance.org. They say, energy is about how the movement happens. Choices about energy include variations in movement flow and the use of force, tension, and weight. Or, as the musician Jimmy Lunceford said, it ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it. So in this episode, we're going to talk about 2 ways to work with energy: movement qualities and imagery. Let's start with movement quality. This is when we use different types and degrees of muscular control to give the same movement wildly different flavors. And like all dimensions, this is just a great way to create some simple variety. If you feel like your dance is getting stale and one-dimensional, vary the movement qualities, and instantly it's got variety. But like all other dimensions, the movement quality has its own unique effect. For movement qualities, I think the big difference is that the moves just don't just look different, they look like they feel different. And this is a distinctive feature of belly dance. It's sensuality, the way it focuses attention on the senses. Our dance invites the audience to imagine how nice it feels just to move. And so when we use different movement qualities, we present a much richer landscape for them to explore. And in my opinion, this is one of the most underused tools in our toolkit. A lot of us fall into a rut of using just a couple of movement qualities, say soft and sharp. But that's like trying to paint with just black, white, and red. You can create some great art that way, but if that's all you ever do, you're missing out on a tremendous variety of options and subtle variations. So besides just soft and sharp, a movement can be gooey, loose, bouncy, heavy, locked, suspended, or very deliberately placed in its position. And I'm sure there are lots of other dimensions that you might want to explore. So how do you use this in your dance? Well, I like to think of this in 2 branches. One is you can create strong contrast when you mix 2 very different qualities, like soft and locked. You can use those within the same movement, or you can change movements when you change qualities. The other branch is to create subtle contrast by mixing and matching dimensions that are more closely related. For example, you can mix smooth with gooey, and that is an especially handy combination for tuck-seams. Now, any movement can easily be done with multiple qualities, and most can be done with all of them if you really dig deep. So explore. Our next approach is imagery. Imagery is when you hold an image in your mind as you dance. And that image can be almost anything as long as it's vivid. You could choose a single word, like water. You could imagine yourself in a setting, like standing in a warm tropical lagoon next to a gentle waterfall. You can even imagine an entire backstory, like you're a water sprite playing with your friends in that lagoon. Now, if you're doing traditional belly dance, remember that we're not trying to communicate a narrative to the audience like we would in a ballet. But just holding narrative elements in mind can give us a backdoor into using more variety of movement qualities without getting so technical and cerebral about it. Now, you all know I'm the belly dance geek and I love getting cerebral, but I feel like that analytical approach is for learning about how the dance works. But when you're on stage, you really want to be bringing it from the heart and from your instincts that have been informed by that learning. And so in a lot of ways, imagery is the most natural way to bring in movement qualities. And there's a good chance that you've already seen this in action. A whole lot of teachers will tell you to imagine moving through pea soup or dancing in sticky honey to get you to work with the gooey movement quality. Now, imagery is also great for creating emotional texture and motivation, but that's outside the scope of dimension, so we'll talk about that another time. Some of my favorite images are wafting incense smoke, falling leaves, splashing water. I also especially love popcorn popping, which is a great fit for a melody progression. So to work with those images, just pick an image, hold it in your mind, and play. And you'll find that if you do that, you will probably end up with a mix of standard named belly dance movements with more organic off-menu options. Now, if you're going for a traditional look, don't be afraid of going off menu. Most of the dancers, quote, over there, include a lot of organic movement. A lot of a given dancer's je ne sais quoi is in how she departs from the things that we can list in a dance class curriculum. The trick here is that when we go off menu, we want to stay consistent with the Oriental dance aesthetic. And if you're a more experienced dancer, chances are you will be. You've just got that aesthetic in your bones through all of these standardized examples that you've worked with over time. If you're less experienced and you're not sure how to gauge whether you're within that aesthetic, then you may want to get some guidance from a teacher or a mentor. And if you're a fusionista and not going for traditional, Imagery is a fantastic way to branch outside of the tradition while still creating a coherent piece of art. So regardless of whether you're a traditionalist or looking to explore, Imagery is a fantastic tool. Now, I find it most effective to maintain the same image for an entire song, but that will really depend on your preferences and especially on your music. Songs with dramatic differences between their sections may not be appropriate for just a single image. A good example is the song Mashal, which really has two flavors within it. One is bold and elegant, and the other one is more sassy and earthy. And so, if you're going to hold imagery for that song, you might want to have two different images that you can switch between while those two feelings are trading off within the song. And if you want some in-depth practice with imagery, check out Imagery and Belly Dance. That's a 35-minute video that I created to guide you through 5 different images, and you can get it for free in the Dimension library. All right, so how do you start using energy in your dance? Well, I recommend that in your practice time, you start by picking a handful of movements and then just play with doing them with as many different movement qualities as you can. Which qualities are your favorites? Which ones do you rarely use? Play with mixing and matching different moves and qualities. See what you can come up with. Sometimes you'll be surprised at how well a particular movement quality goes with a movement when that pairing might not be obvious. I also recommend that you brainstorm some different images that appeal to you. Try a mix of single words, settings, and backstories, then put on some music and play around. Pay attention to what gets your creative juices flowing. Do you respond to certain types of images more than others? And do you prefer single words, settings, or backstories? Even if you don't use all of these ideas, working through a wide variety will help you break out of a creative rut and learn more about your own tastes and preferences. And remember that the resources I mentioned are all included in the Dimension library, which is a free collection of resources that I put together to support this series on Dimension. I've also updated it to include the new movement quality and energy resources that I mentioned today. You can get that for free at bellydancegeek.com/dimension-library. And if you like what you've been hearing, please leave us a review on iTunes. It helps us and it helps other listeners find the show.
Thanks for listening. For more geektacular resources, visit bellydancegeek.com.